I introduce myself also in terms of what I do. I'm a professor at the University of Coimbra, but I'm an architect originally and a town planner, and I continued parallelly to my career in the university to coordinate master plans and a lot of consultancies on participatory budgeting for cities in different countries, and I work also for the World Bank and UNDP on some projects and evaluation of projects on participatory budgeting mainly in Africa and Latin America. But when I chose to focus on Europe was because I think I'm a better cultural mediator with my own continent, because I know how to try to translate a Southern American innovation into a different culture. Unfortunately, I live in Portugal, where people is still very colonialist, so unlikely accepts to drink an innovation that comes from the South, especially from an ex-colonized country. So I work in an institute of social science whose founder, it's a famous sociologist called Boaventura de Sousa Santo, works a lot on the cultural translation. And really, I think that it's very important to try to reimagine the principle in a completely different context area Europe is. Even if is a little bit Latino-Americanizing because of immigration and because of the poverty growing with the crisis, I mean, we are still countries with a welfare state, and the countries are very different. I mean, the similarities from Greece to Sweden are obviously different. But these differences are very stimulating for me. So I work as a consultant for 7 years for the Association of Municipalities of Sweden. And so I work in countries where the legitimacy of politics is still very high and the trust in politicians is very high, and others like in Portugal, in Spain, in Italy, in Greece, it's under the shoes level. So it's I think it's important also to have countries with different participatory traditions, like the community development in UK world, mainly in UK and Ireland, a welfare state consultancy in the Nordic countries, and then all the South, which has a strong tradition of innovation. That's why I understand perfectly that in the beginning of this tour, there was no money. It was not easy to raise money for me to come in here, because innovation normally is recognized only when it's implanted in the same country. So you just don't take innovation because it's very famous in the United States or in South Africa and you want to bring here. It's very unlikely to have funding for doing this. So when I'm interested to open a dialogue with the new context, I know that in the beginning I have to find my own way. Because, I mean, it's a specificity of innovation, not being recognized unless it's already established. And it's not innovation anymore somehow, so it's a paradox. But so that's why I accepted, because I thought that was important to try to start to create a culture, at least an awareness that this exists, and it exists today in more than 2,500 municipalities in the world, and in a dozen of regions which are dealing with the dissemination of the process at local level through a commitment of the province or of the region. So in this new framework, I thought that could have been interesting. Also, for a funny thing, that in Germany, for example, participatory budgeting started emulating New Zealand. And something that we don't consider real participatory budgeting in New Zealand, which was an experience of community board in Christchurch that was used through an international network and an award that Christchurch received in '93. The network was called Cities of Tomorrow and was funded by the Bertelsmann Foundation in Germany. And this model was used by several German cities to create their own model of participatory budgeting, which had the stigma of the original model. That was just a consultative one. while the majority of participatory budgeting are co-decisional, so people really vote for priority. And the case of New Zealand was a consultative series of board that was impacting also on the budget, but not directly, indirectly. And the same happened in Germany. So this created the mainstream of Germany, whose participatory budgeting until 3 or 4 years ago was completely different from the other countries because it was mainly consultational. So I will try to define participatory budgeting, taking into account your perspective as managers of technical sectors. I have been a planner in some municipalities, so I also know what kind of type of problem we can have when talking about participation. Not only thinking about the participation of the citizens, which has its own problems, but also thinking about our role in the participation. The first two problems I see are linked to the capacity of integrating people that's working on participation in a proper space in the structure of the institution. Because it happens often that people working on participation is half time on participation and half time on other sectors. So they are not, when they are evaluated in the end of the year, are evaluated by the original sectors instead then of the participatory sector. And this can create problems of belonging and also of recognition of their work. So the first thing I usually suggest to municipalities that work or regions that work on participation is to create a proper sector. But in many cases they are scared. They are scared because if you have a sector, the costs will be visible. And the cost will be related by someone to a very simple cost-benefits idea that the number of participants determines not the added value, but the result. And so you will measure the result according to the number of participants, which does not correspond, obviously, to the quality of participation, to the depth of deliberation. And so it's quite very poor indicator, especially because participation is about creating civic engagements. So its results sometimes are spread in a long period of time, but you cannot measure these results soon unless you create a proper, or you relate with, I don't know, if you have a statistic department, you create some kind of inquiries that can measure these kind of things. In the case that this is not the true, you must work on trying to reduce costs. Because otherwise cost will be so visible that, especially in the startup, when people is still unsecure on the process because they don't know, they don't see the results, you can have the process destroyed by opposition because of the costs. And so they will calculate the unitary cost, how many costs and how many people participated. They will divide and say, oh, it costs, the unit is too expensive. And so it's an important issue. That's why in the beginning many municipalities, they do not create a sector, and they use money, hidden in the sense that the part is coming from the communication department, part from the statistical department, and so you don't see exactly how much the process did cost. Okay, so participatory budgeting, as you can see in many languages, it's spreading around very different countries. And in some cases, the translation is like the Swedish or the German is a civic budget, or the Polish civic budget, and in other cases, it's really the translation of the Portuguese participatory budgeting. And it's a process that we define as an ideoscape. So it's not a model, exactly, it's a series of principles that become true in specific experiences, which are so different that they transform the model. So the model is constantly evolving because of the experiences that make it true. And this is the distribution 2 years ago in the world. I'm finishing, possibly in my email there will be the new map today. In Auckland I will show the new map tomorrow. Where Europe has the same number of participatory budgeting of Latin America now. because in these 2 years there was an explosion, especially in some countries like UK, Poland, Portugal, that changed the numbers. But the strength in Latin America is due to the fact that two countries, Peru and Dominican Republic, have national laws obliging all the municipalities to have participatory budgeting. We will get back to this issue. And this map of Portugal shows the contagion as the main element for spreading the innovation, because many municipalities who share local newspaper and local radios, as soon as one have a news, even something innovative, even if they have different political color, as in this case there are some communists, some to the right, they emulate one the other because they see the effect on the territory. And the mayor usually talk because they have distrital assemblies together, and so they have a lot of dialogue. If we try to see what these different experiences have in common, and you try to find a minimum denominator, I will use the definition of a English think tank, which is PB units, that says participatory budgeting is a democratic process which entrusts no, they put the S here, possibly. They entrust citizens, and not only former citizens, so maybe also immigrants, children, people that has not the right to vote in that territory, or maybe people who's working there or is studying there but has not formal residence, to decide how to allocate part of a municipal budget or another budget that affects them. This suggests the PB could be a fractal, so reproducing itself, I don't know, in a company, in a public agency, as it happened in some cases of PBs of a housing agency, for example, in Canada or in France, water agency, or other specific issues. Some specificity is that participatory budgeting is open in decision on money, which appears very practical and very symbolic, because opening on money is like giving the impression that something is changing in the political culture. And it's based on the idea that it's possible to rebuild social trust, but also that both citizens and politicians are better than in the other's perspective. Because we imagine, normally we talk about the mistrust, but we talk about the mistrust of people in the politician. But we forget that also politicians often has no confidence in the people. They think that they are egoistic, self-referential, they cannot have solidarity. So in this case, they imagine that it's not possible to open to them big slices of the budgets, because, for example, we have to defend social inclusion and redistributive justice because the other persons will not take care of the poorest. Which is definitely, in my experience of 15 years with BB, it's definitely not true. But can be true if the offer of participatory process is poor. So if you offer to people a participatory process of this type, where citizens dialogue directly with the politician in an individual-based form. So each one can write an internet form on an email or can dialogue with the councillor, because in these cases they really ask something for themselves and not for the community. So the impression that the politician takes of society, receive from these processes, is that people is self-referential and egoistic. While you have to create a process in which the demands of people is negotiated within society, with organization and single citizens, before arriving there. I was quoting this morning the typical process of master plan, doing master plans. Usually in many countries, you finish the draft of the master plan, you open to the public, and you give 3 months for people to do comments and critics. And then you answer to these comments. When I, as a planner, coordinate master plans, usually my politicians tell me, don't take care of any of these individual things, and you just answer no because no. So it means this request to violate the philosophy of the plan, and that's all. But the collective one, please give to us, because we want to discuss them. It's not just a collective group represents a bigger pressure, a lobby, but also that is recognized that someone that has been negotiating, and so reducing some individualism that there is in people requests. Another important thing of PB is that it deals with the procedure that has a very strong and tight schedule normally. So you have, I don't know, in Italy the 20th of September you have to deliver the proposal for the pluriannual plan, and so all the services and public works has to be listed inside, and then in November you have to deliver the budget to the council, because the council had to approve before December in order the state to stamp it in January, being able to start. So this timeline helps a lot processes to produce results, more than other processes in which you have the money and you have a lot of time to discuss. These processes are normally paralyzed by veto or sometimes you know, discussions and conflicts, but they don't end in something in many cases. Budget, you know that if you don't find a solution before that date, you will lose the money at pro of someone else that has been able to decide and gather votes around a proposal. So another important thing is using PB as a tool of continuity or a tool of discontinuity. Because in some cases you have good processes going on of consultation previously done in your territory, and you can imagine to add something with PB. That's happening, for example, in South Africa, where there is a long tradition in the last 20 years of strategic planning with people. So they realize that strategic planning sometimes it is frustrating, because it's producing a lot of provisions, but not many action necessarily. Because when you do strategic planning, you plan not only the things for the public sector, but also the space for the private sector. And private sector goes with the market. So if they are interested, they do something. Otherwise, things stay on the paper for a long time. And people get frustrated because in the discussion, there are so many things that we can do, and just few of them happen. Also, they have the images of 30 years of developments, and then every year, just a few happen. So participatory budgeting is being integrated in South Africa in this mechanism of strategic planning, because it can give the impression that people has a decision that produce also immediate results without losing the vision. While normally participatory budgeting has a limit, which is that the decision that people, the requests that comes from the people are usually very scattered. So they don't answer to a philosophy of the development of territory, but usually they just respond to very specific needs in the communities, which can create a sort of randomization of planning without losing the visions in some cases. So it could be important today to make participatory budgeting like a center of other typology of participation, in order that it gives concreteness and the impression of evolution of things, but at the same time does not lose the vision and can integrate with other processes. These are 5 specificities of participatory budgeting which distinguish it from other processes. Explicitly discussing financial issues. So not only the issue we are discussing, but also the one that relate to finances around. For example, we have a pot of 3 million on which people is voting the priorities. But then we have all the rest of the budget. So trying to relate the things, knowing that these 3 million represent the 15% of the budget, of the investments, and so 2% of the budget, and try to explain how resources come in order that people can be able to understand that, for example, the cuts in the transfer from the central states are affecting the autonomy of the local entity, and so are making difficult to flexibilize some planning, because maybe money is arriving saying the project has to be like this, and so you cannot discuss really this project, and this kind of lack of flexibility. Second element is having cycles, because negotiation needs time. So a cycle is a routine, so it means that the process enters as a policy in a regular form in the behavior of the municipality. The third element is coinciding with an institutional responsibility. What does it mean this? That there are processes in the world that are similar to PB, but they're not PB because they don't dialogue with politics. So, for example, the community-driven development of the World Bank in some places with ongoing civil wars or high levels of corruption is skipping completely the politician. So it's just a technical process that the society receives money, they are beneficiaries, so you can imagine that they will distribute well the money, which is not necessarily the case, because they will benefit from it, and but you don't take into account the existence of politicians. The other one is having some degree of co-decision, which becomes very important to distinguish PB from other typical consultative methods, and giving feedbacks to citizens, because feedbacks have to be very clear. For example, when you publish the budgets, there has to be a chapter or some notes that allows to evidence soon what has been discussed and decided by people. There are some cases in Italy in which you have it's called social budgets, social balance. It's like a posteriori analysis done every year to understand which kind of social effects had the different policies of the public institution. It was born in the private sector, but the idea is everything we do has some effects on social issue, or on environmental issues, or on gender issue, or young children issues. So you can have specific balances which analyze the effect of every policies on the domain of gender, social issues, or environmental issues. Why? Because normally we are used to the idea that social instances are dealt with by the social affairs departments, which is not necessarily true, because you can do things through the change in the traffic. You can do things that benefit elderly people. You can do architectural change for eliminate barriers that will benefit elderly, but at the same time young families and people with trolleys and children. So this is the idea of trying to avoid to project on people the division of the institution, because we have the tendency, we do a participatory process on planning, and the person starts to talk about healthcare, and we say, no, sorry, this is not the place for that. And people get very frustrated, they never get back. Social capital is very fragile. If they appear, they do an effort to be there, and you silence them, you shut up their mouth because they are out of the theme, they will disappear. So the problem of the institution is how to canalize everything emerges there in a useful way, not to frustrate people, and to take into account this advantage of having a space for gathering needs and demands. So usually participatory budgeting have a variable geometry. For example, there are some which are divided in main issues and neighborhood issues. So they have some money for one typology and some money for the other. So to get people used to discuss the city and not just their small area of living. Then you have others that separate, for example, upkeeping request, maintenance request from investments. So investments go to the next year, and when the person said, oh, the series of lamps in this social neighbor are not working since 1 year, when do you change them? And this kind of thing is canalized soon to the services. So maybe next week you will come to the next meeting and the lamps are working, or the elevator is working. You get an immediate confidence that PB is working, because it's producing immediate effect on your daily quality of life. So this can help citizens to make the big jump that is saying, now I can believe you that you will listen to me in changing the freeway design, because you have been able to fix the elevator. if you are not able to fix the elevator, I'm sure that you will never take into account my position for the freeway. So it's just like a fractal confidence that goes scale up to the next level. And so feedback is very important, especially in the consultative ones, because there are still some models of PB where people is required to gather and say their, describe their wish list, and then in the end the politicians say, okay, thank you very much indeed, we will see next week when we will make you know what we have decided. No? So very traditional method we call selective listening, because then you select what you wanted to listen to. And in this case, feedbacks are even more important, but are very dangerous, because you have to answer to each one of the proposal and say why you say not to that and yes to the other. So sometimes for the politician it's much more easy to make people vote on their priorities. They're having to answer to 900 proposals and say, no, this was not possible because it's always tricky. The justification you give, it's a lie that is covering the fact that there is no money to do everything. And so in the end, it's tautologic, the answer that you give in many cases. No, it's not a priority because it was not a priority. Okay, but was a priority or was not a priority for whom, for example? And here starts the fight of the people with the politicians. So sometimes it's much more easy to make people decide. Which determinant factors for success? Normally, there are 4: political will, cohesion and vitality of the social fabric, financial autonomy, and organizational architecture. I will focus on this one. I will show another PowerPoint, which is 10 steps to create a participatory budgeting, because you're technical personnel, so it could be more useful. I know participatory budgeting that were born in the technical stuff, because they did a proposal, they proposed it, and it was a serious proposal, well done to politician, and politician accepted. So in some cases you have more time or more knowledge to do this proposal, and there are cases in which it worked out. You have to have clear which need drives the experiments. That is another thing that I think is important, and the capacity of granting space of autonomy to civil society. So you have to have a geometry, a variable geometry, in which the society is at the center. People have to perceive that they are the center of the process. Every bureaucratic thing that you can add is very dangerous. I mean, we are used as technicians to put our work in the center sometimes. But for example, you receive 900 proposals. You cannot put on vote 900 proposals. And there are many similar. So you just simply said, okay, these are similar, we will gather together, we will write this proposal comes from the fusion or the merging of these 80 proposals, which were similar. It's not that what we have to do, because people will think that you are superposing bureaucracy to their will. And this will be like a boomerang for the process. So it's better if you make people, for example, you ask people, you send them an email to all the proposals and say, your proposals are similar, do you accept to be fused with the other one? Or we will do a meeting of similar proposal with all the proponents. So could you come so that you will fuse the proposal into only one? So the important is to make people feel at the center every time. Because they are wasting their free time. So they want to be central. Otherwise they stay home. And the other thing is the capacity of creativity to involve also technician and civil servant in the making of. You have rights also, because you are working in the machine and you are also citizens. So you have idea not only as technicians but also as citizens. Sometimes this is not taken into consideration by politicians. I know many cases in which politicians told me, doesn't matter, technical staff has to obey. It doesn't matter if obeys to me or obeys to the people. And I think this is a very wrong position, because when you obey to the people, you enter in a completely different mechanism. in which people will ask things to you all the time. First of all, you will have some new burdens. For example, that people, meeting with the people are in the night, are on Sunday, on Saturday, and so sometimes you have to change your schedule of working, no? And this is important, so you have to get something for that. Which is not necessarily money, but it's like a sort of emotion, some feelings that you're doing something useful and different, not just another bureaucracy. That's, the other thing is that you need the training. Sometimes politicians create a process and then give to the technicians that they don't have any preparation, any skill in the participatory field. And this is very uncomfortable for a person who has a technical language, being thrown in the middle of the people, where people shout sometimes, what the hell are you saying? It's not understandable, translate it. And this your language, you have difficulty if someone has not prepared. Another thing, people, in the beginning of this process, people shout a lot, because they have accumulated frustrations. And people are saying, they are saying very interesting things. But you take into account the shouting more than the contents. Because the shouting is not the way in which you expose things to the people. So you need, I don't know, a psychological support, something that makes you feel that you can go beyond the tone, you can go beyond the way of expression and go straight to the contents, which maybe are very interesting. So I think that this thing differs, so it's not the same putting a technician to work on a bureaucratic procedure and to a participatory procedure. So, for example, in Portugal we have several interesting cases of municipalities like Cascais, which has the same size as Wellington, which created a master degree, specific master degree for the technician of the municipality. Every year 32 technicians have the right to apply for the master. And they will be taught the transversal issue of participation. All of them, they become mediator that can work in the participatory process. And each one of them will do his or her thesis in the field of his action. I mean, the technicians from planning in the planning sector, environment in the environmental sector, but all together they will have this basic preparation in participation. I think it's a good thing because you give score for their career, for example, which is not normally happening. I did it with professors in the school for some participatory budgeting that deal with school children, and it was wonderful because the course was recognized, was giving score, they were there until midnight every day discussing and doing experiments. So I think that we cannot use people as a raw material without giving back something. Because if you're asking an effort of language, an effort of agenda, we must give something to them. So that is something a little bit new. Now, in terms of models, we have to remember that participatory budgeting is not a cycle of discussion, is an integration between a cycle of discussion and a cycle of implementation. Without real implementation and fast implementation, nobody will come back to discuss with you, because they will think the process is useless, unproductive. And then we have three typology. Territorial, which is a PB who divides the territory in 10, 8, 6 parts, and each part has the right to decide on some money. Then thematic, which is concentrated in some issues, like, for example, housing, environment, new energies. I know very different typologies, culture. And then actorial, which is focused on specific actor. There are cases for immigrants, for gender issues. This is an overlapping. Gender issues is between thematic and actorial, and school for children and young people. So you can have a face-to-face approach. You can have a virtual digital approach where decision or proposal are passing through the internet. And the most common is mixed approach, in which you have a phase of high deliberation with more interested people, and then you put the final list of wishes into votes for all the population. And you have largest number. Just for doing an example, the city of Cascais, which is similar to yours, they have 180,000 inhabitants. The voters the participants to the assemblies are around 900, and the voters are 23,000 for 500. Okay? So it means 24 times more than the participant in the assemblies. So you can capture different public with different free time, with different culture of participation. These are thematic cases on housing, and this is a the green one are participatory budgeting for children in Europe. There is one at regional level who's very interesting, is in France, and is the case of Poitou-Charentes, a region coordinated by Ségolène Royal. And then here, the issue, co-decisional or consultative, so selective listening or involving people in the final decision through a political pact, because always people has no legal binding force, obviously, but it's a political pact. I will respect what you decide. And the spectrum, so in the empowerment line, one is here in consulting, and the other is between partnership and decision making, depending on how the vote is done. And yeah, here is the money spent on information. But you have to know that in the first year you need information, but in the second year will be the results themselves to produce a mouth-to-mouth dissemination of the process. So you can lower the money put on this issue and maybe raise the money for facilitation to better the quality. Because one of the problems of the quality of discussion is that if you do big assemblies, the majority of people will not speak. The usual suspect will speak. But if you do small workshop and then you elect a representative of each workshop and you translate all the small workshop outcomes into the general outcome, this will cost a lot much of time and energies, but it will be much more effective in including a major diversity of people which are not the usual militants. These are the cycles that you have. And this is a very important thing to remember, is that the satisfaction of people is superior to the formula result less expectation. So what you have to do is either lower expectations with very clear statements on how much money there is, how many possibilities there is, or raise results. Increasing result is not always easy, because if you have a public institution which is not very well organized, not coordinated, for example, and PB does not help to coordinate better. Usually PB has, I don't know, a responsible or two responsible in each department, and the director and the responsible meets every month for taking, for giving answer on participatory budgeting issues. So there is a structure which is composed exactly for enhancing results of participatory budgeting. So if you're not able to do this, it's better that you lower expectations. Obviously, expectation cannot be too low. I mean, if you just discuss on the color of the benches, nobody will spend time to do this. But it's a good space, participatory budgeting, for information on constraints, for example. If you say to people in a public meeting, we don't have money this year, you will have to pay a lot of taxes, and this is not effective. It looks like a defense, and people will continue to think that the money there is, but you are stealing it for your purposes, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, this is the typical reaction. I asked, in Portugal we have, the budgets are usually 3 times more bigger than the final budgets, the real budgets. So you do a provision of 3 million, and then you have 1 million, okay? And this is since 20 years, it's always the same. So my question was, why don't you correct? Why don't you learn from the previous year and you do a better, realistic budget? And the reason is the politician, to make the budget approved, they insert inside all the things the opposition say, so that the opposition will vote for the budgets. But then, when they have 1/3 of what they said, they have to choose, and they will choose only the thing that they decided to have, and not the opposition. So this mechanism continue. So I asked two people, what do you think about, what do you think is the reason of the fact that since 10 years, your provisional budget is 3 times more? You know what people answer? They steal it. They are stealing it. So you have always to think about what people is thinking of what you are doing, And if you think about that, you get scared. And you prefer to do a budget of 1 million for having 1 million. You have more difficult procedure to approve it. But then you are okay, people will not think that you are stealing budgets. Maybe you will have even more than you have imagined. So that is about expectation, and that's why participation with co-decision is easier. Because if people vote, they know exactly that they are voting for this amount of money, and all the other expectation will be out of reality. So they will get back home knowing that if you do the 5 things they voted for, they are okay with the process. They are happy. But if you have a consultative process in which you don't clarify how much money, every citizen who participates go back home hoping that his or her proposal will be the chosen one. And when it's not, get frustrated and never come back. So another time, the distraction, the elimination of the social capital. So here you can see that people, it's very sensitive. When things they are not realized properly, people start not going anymore to participation, to the participatory process. When they start back to build things, people get confident and get back. So you can see that the line is growing from 15,000 to 43,000. But it's having up and downs because people is hysterically hypersensitive. Yeah. So I wanted to show this last thing. These are the model with co-decisional and consultative. You see that the dead one in Portugal, the one who died were interrupted are the green ones. They are all concentrated here. It shows that the consultative model has no sustainability because it's too affected by perception of people. So you have the numbers here, and you see that all the ones that are still alive, they are in the decisional area. So I wanted to show you in 5 minutes this proposal of articulation of a startup, which is here, and is in 10 steps. So the first thing is, usually local design is based on an adaptation international model, but soon, and there are cases in which they are copy-pasted from the internet, okay? So they copy another one and they start, and then they have to adapt in the future. But the importance of adaptation is that you have an evolutive mechanism who evolved together with people. So you have to create in the beginning a coordination board who elaborates the operative model and also see how to fund the startup. Members can be official of different branches of the administrative structure, external skill in some cases, and local facilitators. And there can be politician or not, it's up to the promoters. And the functions are coordinating, communicating, doing tests, promotion, and research. So once you create the board, you have to, if possible, to do a social territorial survey. Why is useful? For 2 reasons. The first one is to understand in which sector people will give their time, their spare time to participatory budgeting. The other is understanding if people think they can contribute to budgeting, because the name budgeting is scaring people many times. It's too technical. So sometimes you have to change the name and maybe call it street by street, let's decide together, or something that is more attractive. And maybe you put the undertitle, subtitle, participatory budgeting of Wellington, for example. And the questionnaire is useful for another thing. Not only it gives you the general knowledge about the territory and the main areas, because if people say, like in Italy, we only will be participating if you discuss about public safety and public works, and not about culture and environment, it's useless to start a process on environment and culture, because nobody will be there. but also because when you interview people, you can ask, would you be interested to have new information and to participate to a focus group in creating the rule for a process? And if they say yes, you can contact them and you will have your base group, which will be very useful for in the second phase then to help you. Here you have an example of pre-inquiry with the expectation of people. We discovered that 100% thought that they could not give anything to the budgets. So we have to change all the communication on the budget to make them understand this. And what was the budgets? Other beginning activity could be coordinating the process with other active participatory process and with outsourcing, for example. If you have organization outside the municipality which will be involved. And promoting cross-selling means that every time that a person calls the municipality or the region to ask for a service, in the end you will make the operator say, do you know the participatory budgeting? You can pose your question and solve some problems there. So the cross-selling is very, very useful for dissemination. And then you have to finally shape the space for participation. That means you share the contents with the political level, you decide what is the main purpose. So we want to do social inclusion, so your spaces would have to be very small, putting people at ease, direct communication has to be directed to specific groups. And you can do a charter of values. Charter of values is useful because it says participatory budgeting has to promote diversity and integration and blah, blah, blah. And so when you change the rules every year, you have to keep in mind the Charter of Value, which is like a constitution. The rule changes like the law, but it has to respect the values of the constitution. This is very important because sometimes when the rules are done with the people themselves, they can change the rule in a worse way. Because sometimes social groups that want a recognition can come and say, oh, next year we have the right to 10 votes the association, for example. And so you will change completely the capacity of social inclusion. Then you define procedures, so you plan with the administrative structure what happens with the thing decided by people in the participatory budgeting. So where this thing will have to go after, what are the steps, the itinerary of the decision. You can keep this. If you want, I can leave you the PowerPoint so you will not be scared that you are not able to take all the notes. Then you can do a focus group with citizens to establish some rules. Why this is important? To give to people the impression that this is not a pitfall, but is a process that is created for them, with them. And so if you don't have other people, you can call the people of the inquiry, for example, and ask to each one of them, bring 2 persons with you. I did it and it's quite effective in the end. So the goals of this part is subdivision of the territory, not to do a bureaucratic subdivision that reproduce errors of previous subdivisions or neighborhood, to make emerge the expectation on the context and the facilitation survey. What do people want from facilitators? They want neutrality, or they want a politician there who's attracting and catalyzing interest? No? Then you can test communication with this focus group to see if it's effective, if they think that they would come attracted by the communication you did. Or, for example, in Rome we had a fantastic one. There was a gasometer and there was a flying object landing in the gasometer, and was written, someone imagined an airport for extraterrestrials in the gasometer, and then was saying, do your proposal for the public budget in the participatory budgeting of Rome 11. So, I mean, sometimes you can use everything you want. So you decided with them who is entitled to vote, just the resident, or also the commuters, for example, the workers, the students, how to define agenda setting. So in every meeting, who's defined the agenda setting? Is the municipality? Is a committee of people? Is a commission, a special commission done with the opposition? And the other thing is who filters the proposal, which is very important, as I told you before. So this kind of question that, and then how to choose or vote priorities. For example, is each one entitled to 1 vote or to 3? Because when you're entitled to 3 votes to different things, you will read all the proposal. If you're entitled to 1 vote, you will usually vote for your proposal. So you will not read, you will not learn from the other. So sometimes these small things are very important to determine the quality. You see here a process we did in Vimodrone in Italy. We asked to the people which one of these 3 divisions, or if they have a 4th proposal for the territory. So we chose according to their point of view, so that the geography was man-centered and not barrier-centered. Like, you know, you take a river normally, you take... and it was interesting. When we were talking about a big street for dividing 2 neighbors, the people said, no, this is not a division for us, it's the center of our life. So the street cannot be used to divide 2 neighbors, because this is the referential for both neighbors. So the idea was to put a cross neighbor on participatory budgeting that had in the center the commercial street. Then you define finally the operational proposal with the physical space and timetable of the meeting, for example, communication and facilitation, the role of ICTs. For example, today, SMS are much more effective than internet, because a lot of people more has phones than internet at home, or maybe they have smartphones today. And then you can go to the infra-institutional procedure for approval of PB guidelines, because in some municipalities they want to have a formal approval in commissions and of the council, and so you have to imagine that in some places this will be the case. And then you start finally the startup of the process. You decide the monitoring and evaluation and how to annually enrich the process. So who does fulfill this task? And remember that when you do monitoring, if it's yourself, many people will not answer. I saw the difference when I have the logotype of the municipality, people reject to answer because they think they are being spied. When you say in the beginning, there is a university here which is doing a work of monitoring people, participating people, usually feel at ease. So having an external partner is better. Here you can see the cycle. The cycle normally starts in spring with making the needs and proposal emerge. Then there is a technical evaluation in the summer in which technicians evaluate the feasibility and costs of each proposal so that people can know how much everything costs and can vote for it, having the awareness of what they are proposing. And then there will be the voting by the people, and then the final approval of the formal budget. So this is a normal average cycle. So this is the last slide. When PB is resilient, are there principles that has to respect? Yes, mainly what I told you before, being evolutionary all time, maintaining people at the center, for example in filtering, and respecting the autonomy between society and institution. This is important for institutions. They have to know that they have a space of respect and autonomy, but it's important from society. Just an example, if a mayor stays all the meeting with the people, will completely change the dynamic, because people will ask questions and expect answer, and we start tension, will not project, will not plan. So the important, but the mayor cannot be absent because people otherwise perceive that this process is not central politically. So the important is that the mayor come and say, this is a very important meeting, I'm committed to the result, and then say, now is your space for decide, for propose, this is a process for you and by you, so, and go it away. So normally you have to have commitment and not invasion of space. And that's all. Thank you very much.
I'm conscious that we've actually gone for an hour, but perhaps we can have just a few minutes for questions.
I've actually got another commitment that I need to rush away from, so I can't stay. But thank you, that was actually really interesting. you'll leave your slides, because I think I'm going to need a bit of time to sort of reflect, because there's quite a lot in
Yeah,
there.
and you, in my PowerPoint, in the other one, there is also in the end my address, so if you want to write me, and you can write me any day.
Thank you. Thank you
Okay.
very much for giving us your time. Sorry for that.
If someone wants to ask questions, I'm here.
Yeah, I'll start off. It seems like listening to your talk is very much almost more about, or it's generally about, to me, the process of participatory decision making. And it wasn't until the end I was wondering what the budget word was here, because you talked about it right at the start. But is it true that like the majority of this process is really about like authentic participatory involvement in decision making, and a budget is a sort of an add-on almost at the end? Because in some cases this process is just equally relevant to something that it doesn't have any money involved at all, but it might be about priorities or something. You know what I mean? So I guess my question is, you know,
no, it's very clear, your question. It's a feeling. I have not it so clear as in the moment you were formulating your question, because on one side this is just revealing that the budget is just a filter for passing from promises to reality. So the budget in itself is nothing. The budget is making fit decision together in order to make them implementable. Yeah. No, yeah. So that complexity of the budget is partially fictitious. But on the other side, this is not all the budgets. The budget is done by revenues and by expenditures. So the majority of cases just discuss the expenditures, and maybe only a part of the expenditures, which is the most flexible and is more easy to see in the public space, so investments. Because the problem of discussing, for example, personnel is that contracts are defended by agreements, trade unions, and so it's completely useless to discuss for days and days with people about something that is stiff. No? Yeah. So it's a matter of it's a very realistic process. Say what is possible to discuss, what is flexible. You can reduce expenditures, okay, current expenditures, but it's a very complex process to have what kind of reduction? 5% in the end? Because you have still to run cars. You can substitute cars with bicycle, but you have to maintain schools, and you have to buy paper. You can substitute photocopies with electronic signatures. I mean, this is all true, but the reduction will be a small shrink. In the end, nothing's changed really in the structure. So, what is important? What's the relation with the other part of the budget to this part of the budget who is decided with people? It's like an external awareness that people get through documents that project the general situation of revenues and the situation of the other parts of the budget which are not touched by the process. But really the process is a process of decision making on a pre-decided slice usually. There are cases in which 100% of investments, but also investments are pre-decided slice. Because you know that if you do a lot of investments this year, the next year you will need a lot of upkeeping, so you will need a current expenditure larger, no? For the investment you did this year. So this will be pre-deciding your part. There are some cases of PBs that have simulator, budget simulator, done in Germany, for example, and in Sweden. And so people can propose different arrangements of the budgets and can freeze the proposal in the end and save it and send to the municipality. Like is Orsa, it's a small municipality in Sweden, in the north of Sweden, which does this. It's very bold because, I mean, this implies a larger discussion and feedback from the councillor to the people who propose this rearrangement of the budget and say, no, this is not possible because otherwise we will have to raise the taxes 10% to have this. But it's a small city of 3,000 inhabitants, so it's possible to do it. I don't think in a metropolis this will be possible to accept thousands of simulation of the budget may be done like this. No, you move the simulator and send to the municipality, reduce taxi to of 90% and have the double of services. Obviously, this is not working. No, so I don't know if I answered it, but it was interesting. It's,
So I just have a question because it wasn't clear to me. Say if you're doing participatory budgeting within the Wellington region, which is a really big area, it's not just the city, then I'm not sure whether do you ring fence a certain amount of funding for each neighbourhood or whatever area, and is there then a process where you compare across, or is there some funding separate for, so say you've got a whole group of people in our Wairarapa, which is, you know, an hour and a half away, who say we want heaps of money for flood protection versus, you know, people in Wellington City who want heaps of money for transport, say, and someone in Kapiti who wants something different. How do you, between those completely separate areas, how do you deal with that?
okay, so let's imagine a city like this. There are several possibilities that I'm imagining in different cases. For example, Chengdu in China is a 14 million inhabitant city. They do participatory budgeting like in Cotacachi in Ecuador only on the villages and not on the center.
There's a certain amount of money you deal with.
Yeah,
just
they put the amount of money and they divide to the different villages. You can choose two formulas. One is in an equal division, which is unequal because the village can have different size and different problems. And the other one is to create like an index that help you to divide the money for the different areas depending on some issue like number of roads, kilometer inhabitants, distance from the center, the city center. So you can create, you have to remember one thing, every indicator we call technical indicator, but it's not technical, it's political. If you decide to give the same amount of money to everything, you are doing a strong political choice. Redistributive, but unjust in many cases. So you will be criticized politically. So the technical indicators are technical because they are known before the process. So you clarify them and you say, the distribution will be this one. You want to criticize next year, we will change. But now, these are the rules. According to this rule, then you will decide in this framework of rules. So you can have several different arrangements in terms of how to divide the money to the different areas and which kind of part of the municipality to choose. But you can put rules for cooperation, for example. If you imagine that each neighbor is too much self-referential, for example, you have two villages like this. And they have one school. You know what happens in participatory budgeting normally? Each one wants a school. If this one year gets a school, the other will start, oh, I want a school too. And you say, but there are 200 meters. Why do you need a school? You know, you can put technical rules that are no school in the ray of 1 kilometer, because people can walk to the school for 1 kilometer. So there are many cases like this with these rules, and so if this cooperates together, they will get more score in the voting, the final voting. So you give a reward to cooperation. In some cases, I know some cases in which not all the village participate to participatory budgeting every year. There are 10 villages this year and other 10 next year. Okay, so you have a rotation, for example.
What would you do, I'm just thinking, for that whole area, I guess you could run another process for the whole area as a whole as well. Have you ever done that where you've got, because I'm thinking, say, there must be some projects that would benefit the whole region but be in one part of it.
Yeah.
So how?
There are many participatory budgeting which divide the sum, as I was telling before, in two parts. So you have 3 million, so 2 million are for big proposal for the city, up to 500,000 euros each one, so you can do 4 things. Okay, you have 2 million here, so you can do 4 things big, and then these are projects that cannot overcome 100,000. Okay, so you can do 10 projects of this type, and this project can be localized in the neighborhood. They can have like a neighborhood scope. Okay, So just being a local park, a local roads, but this has to be the new airport or the new bridge for the town and something like this. I don't know if I answered.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, so the participants kind of volunteer their time to be involved in the process. Is that kind of the general way it tends to work, or do people get paid to be involved?
Yeah, no. Normally they are volunteer because you can pay, and there are some rare cases, for example in Germany, based on the model of the Planungszelle, in which you can do it by random selection, but you really have to use random selection, otherwise people will perceive that you're doing something for your friends. So you cannot have voluntary participation and then paying people. There is discussion about even the reimbursement for the transportation fare. So sometimes, for example, in the days of participatory budgeting, there are some municipalities that put transportation system for free for 1 day of meetings in order that people can go without. But I don't think it's possible to imagine. Usually it's better not, because this is about common goods, about deciding together, about the wealth and and of the city. So if you start to merchandise, commercialize, commodified, how do you want to say, this mechanism, it becomes a little bit dangerous. You will have some professional participation in the end. So normally the discussion, there have been discussion on this, but they ended in nothing. People themselves, they refused. Obviously they can create problem because it can select the richest, they have more time and more money to come. So you have to create, for example, there are babysitting sessions for families, for young families, so you can bring your kids and the kid is taken, I mean, someone will take care of it, someone organized it by the municipality. In some cases you reserve before, so they know how many kids will appear, because they have a hotline, a free line, from which you can reserve a place for your kids. So there are these kind of things that facilitates better than paying people.
So but participation is self-selected.
Yeah, or in several cases I know is mixed. There is a part which are free participants and the other part is selected. But the only thing that the selected gain is a specific letter from the mayor that say, my dear Mustafa Ali, you're very important for your city, and this works with immigrants because normally they wouldn't participate, but if they get a nominal letter with their name from the mayor, signed by the mayor, saying please come because you are very important, you can give idea, many of them they come. So this is clear now. So it could be a type of invitation, a different type of invitation through random selection or through specific groups, but normally it's...
So I'm thinking if you did a participatory decision-making on a particular topic, you'd probably get those people who have strong feelings either way, who are motivated enough to participate, coming along. Yeah. And then you want to actually try and select kind of a sample citizens panel to make up kind of a good balance in the middle. Is that kind of the way it might work?
Yeah, that's why participatory budgeting tends preferentially to be generalistic. So to avoid to concentrate on one issue, because when you concentrate on one issue, there is a sort of Darwinian self-selection of people. So the idea is that we are open to every kind of issue, so that everybody could be motivated by a different motivation.
Yeah. So establish a group and then let them come up with the issues. So here's your
but you can do outreaching, go into the people. There are several examples of traveling buses on small vans that go around and with computer, and people can vote, they can have information. So you can do a lot of outreaching, but the idea is still that this is a voluntary service to your community. It's the way in which you show that you are committed to your city. If you don't want to be, you can avoid to participate. So it's this is not a tragedy, maybe.
Can you talk about the contribution that central government have made to local government as incentives for getting into it, and also that issue of people transferring their vote or their right to another person or to a group who they perceive as having more expertise on the issue?
This is a case very interesting. It's Lazio region. You can see each one of these points is a participatory budgeting, and they were able to have birth because they did not know what participatory budgeting is, but the region Lazio opened it, they put 16 million per year on participatory budgeting. That means that 5 millions were on a sector decided by people every year. There have been 1 year university, 1 year was clean energies, 1 year was the health. People could vote priorities of the region in this area, and then there were 11 million of municipal process. 1 million was for the municipalities to make a project of participation, and the best ones, judged by a commission, were winning some money for facilitation, publication of information, and these kind of things. And then there were 5 million on public works and 5 million of innovative environmental issues that were given to the first priorities of each municipality for a maximum of 300,000 euros. So if a small municipality had approved an interesting process of substituting, as happened in Borbona, substituting the traffic lights with substituting electric energy with, for example, with the green solar panels. And this was the first priority. The region was paying up to 300,000 euros for this priority, in order to avoid that the small municipality would frustrate people deciding something and then not having the money for doing the priority. So there was, you see, was a support that the state gave to the other people, which was very interesting. And in Poland, they now the central state reimburse 10 to 30% of the budget spent on participatory budgeting, and to the rural municipality, only the rural, not the urban one. So there are 1,000 participatory budgeting today in Poland, 1,104, because they have some obligation, which the state obliged to do, some formal things to respect, and in change of this, there is a formula, and depending on the size and the social level of the municipality, the state reimburses from 10 up to 30% of the expenditure of the municipality. So the more you spend, the more you can be reimbursed. So this is good sometimes because it helps small municipality to produce results.
I think we've been at the end. We won't have enough break before.
Okay.
So, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Very interesting.
Available if you want.